What happens when one of Hollywood's most straightforward actors walks into what he thinks is a genuine interview, only to discover the host has a completely different agenda? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that had Mark Wahlberg storming off The Tonight Show set, leaving Jimmy Fallon scrambling to explain to his stunned audience why his guest just called him out on live television. This isn't your typical celebrity meltdown. This is about respect, authenticity, and what happens when someone refuses to play the game. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story has layers that will make you question everything you think you know about late-night television. Mark Wahlberg walked onto The Tonight Show set that evening with the same energy he brings to every interview, direct, honest, and expecting the same in return. He'd been making the rounds promoting his latest film, and while most hosts had treated the project with genuine curiosity, something felt different the moment he sat down across from Jimmy Fallon. The studio audience was buzzing with their usual excitement, completely unaware that they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable exchanges in late-night history. "Mark Wahlberg, everybody," Jimmy announced with his signature enthusiasm, but there was something in his tone that Mark immediately picked up on. It wasn't the warm welcome he'd received on other shows. It was performative in a way that felt calculated. "So Mark, I have to ask, this new movie of yours, did you actually think people would take it seriously?" The question hit Mark like a slap. He'd spent months preparing for this project, working with real experts, diving deep into research, and pouring his heart into a character that meant something to him. To have it dismissed so casually, so publicly, was not just unprofessional, it was disrespectful. "Excuse me?" Mark's voice carried that edge that anyone who's worked with him knows means business. "What exactly are you trying to say here, Jimmy?" Jimmy's laugh felt forced, mechanical. "Oh, come on, Mark. You know what I mean. It's just, well, let's be honest here. It's not exactly Oscar material, is it? I mean, you've done some questionable projects before." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the playful banter they'd come to expect from Jimmy's show. This felt personal, mean-spirited, and completely out of left field. Mark's jaw tightened as he processed what was happening. "Questionable projects?" Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping to that low, controlled tone that anyone who knows him recognizes as a warning sign. "Jimmy, I came here tonight thinking we were going to have a real conversation about the work, about the story we're trying to tell. But it sounds like you've already made up your mind without even seeing the film." "Well, I did see it," Jimmy replied with a smirk that made several audience members visibly cringe. "I mean, my team screened it, and let's just say, the reviews aren't exactly glowing. But hey, we all have our off days, right?" Mark's hands clenched slightly, a subtle movement that the cameras caught perfectly. "Your team screened it? Jimmy, the movie doesn't come out for another 2 weeks. The only people who've seen it are industry professionals and critics who signed confidentiality agreements. So either you're lying to me right now, or you're breaking some serious protocols." The color drained from Jimmy's face for just a moment before he recovered with another laugh. "Oh, Mark, always so serious. This is why people love you. You're so intense about everything. It's entertainment. Lighten up." "Entertainment?" Mark's voice rose just enough to carry across the studio. "Jimmy, this is my livelihood. These are projects I choose carefully, stories I believe in. You just ambushed me on live television with false information, and you want me to lighten up?" Jimmy's producer could be seen frantically gesturing from the wings, clearly trying to signal for a commercial break. But Jimmy seemed determined to dig himself deeper. "Look, Mark, I get it. You're passionate about your work. But sometimes you have to admit when something isn't working. I mean, come on, the dialogue in that prison scene? Even my writers were laughing." That was the moment Mark realized exactly what was happening. Jimmy hadn't just attacked his work. He'd revealed that he and his writing team had been mocking it behind the scenes, probably for weeks. The prison scene Jimmy referenced was deeply personal to Mark, inspired by real conversations he'd had with former inmates during his research. It wasn't just criticism, it was mockery of something meaningful. "Your writers were laughing?" Mark's voice carried a dangerous quiet now. "Jimmy, that scene was based on real people's experiences, real stories of redemption and second chances. And you and your team were sitting around laughing at it?" "Mark, it's just, well, you have to understand our perspective here." Jimmy's confidence was starting to crack. "We have to keep things light, keep the audience entertained. Sometimes that means being honest about what works and what doesn't." "Honest?" Mark stood up slightly in his chair, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his anger grew. "Jimmy, there's nothing honest about what you're doing right now. You brought me on here under false pretenses. You've been lying about seeing the film, and now you're telling me you and your staff have been mocking work that means something to people. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. This wasn't the Jimmy Fallon they knew, the one who played games and made celebrities feel comfortable. This was someone else entirely, someone who seemed to take pleasure in making his guest uncomfortable. "Mark, I think you're overreacting here," Jimmy said, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. "This is just how these interviews go. A little back and forth, some honest feedback." "Honest feedback?" Mark's laugh was bitter. "Jimmy, you haven't been honest once since I sat down. You lied about seeing the movie. You've been condescending from the first question, and now you're trying to gaslight me into thinking this is normal behavior." Jimmy's smile was becoming more strained by the second. "I'm not gaslighting anyone, Mark. I'm just trying to have a conversation here. Maybe we can talk about something else? Your workout routine? Your family?" "No," Mark said firmly. "We're not moving on from this. You brought me here to promote a project, then spent the entire time tearing it down based on lies. And now you want to pivot to safe topics like nothing happened?" The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators were glancing at each other nervously. The audience was shifting in their seats, and Jimmy's usual composure was completely shattered. This was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted interview, but it had become something else entirely. "Mark, I think maybe we should take a break," Jimmy suggested, his voice higher than usual. "A break?" Mark's eyes narrowed. "Jimmy, we've been on for less than 10 minutes and you've already shown your true colors. What exactly do you think a break is going to accomplish?" Jimmy looked desperately toward his producer, who was now standing in the wings making cutting motions across his throat. But the damage was done, and Mark Wahlberg was just getting started. Jimmy's desperation was becoming more obvious by the second, but instead of apologizing or trying to salvage the situation professionally, he made the choice that would ultimately seal his fate. He decided to double down. "You know what, Mark?" Jimmy's voice took on an edge that his regular viewers had never heard before. "Maybe this is exactly what people need to see. Maybe they need to know that Mark Wahlberg can't handle a little honest criticism without throwing a tantrum." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mark's expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculating. "A tantrum? Jimmy, is that really how you want to play this?" "I'm not playing anything." Jimmy shot back, his fake smile completely gone now. "I'm doing my job. Part of that job is asking real questions, not just lobbing softballs so celebrities can feel good about themselves." Mark leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxing in a way that anyone who knew him would recognize as dangerous. "Your job? Jimmy, your job is to entertain people and promote projects. But what you're doing right now isn't journalism, it's not entertainment, it's just mean-spirited garbage." "Mean-spirited?" Jimmy's laugh was harsh now, nothing like his usual giggle. "Mark, I'm being honest about a mediocre movie. If that hurts your feelings, maybe you should make better movies." The studio audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row looked genuinely shocked at Jimmy's words. This wasn't the host they'd come to see. This was someone they didn't recognize at all. Mark's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but the microphones caught every word. "Mediocre movie. Jimmy, you just admitted you haven't seen it. So how exactly are you qualified to judge its quality?" "I don't need to watch every minute of it to know what it is," Jimmy replied, his arrogance now fully on display. "I've seen enough Mark Wahlberg movies to know the formula. Tough guy from Boston, probably some redemption arc, maybe a few explosions. Am I wrong?" "Yeah, you're wrong," Mark said quietly. "But more importantly, you're showing everyone exactly who you really are. The Jimmy Fallon that audiences think they know? The guy who's supposed to be supportive and fun? That's just an act, isn't it?" Jimmy's face flushed red. "It's not an act, Mark. I'm being real with you right now. More real than I've been with most guests." "Real?" Mark's eyebrows raised. "Jimmy, you've been lying since I walked out here. You lied about seeing the movie, you've been condescending and disrespectful, and now you're trying to convince people that this is somehow authentic behavior. Maybe it is authentic?" Jimmy snapped. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending that every project that comes through here is amazing. Maybe I'm tired of kissing up to celebrities who think they're above criticism." Mark stood up from his chair, not aggressively, but with the kind of calm determination that made the entire studio fall silent. "Above criticism? Jimmy, I've never been above criticism. I've taken plenty of hits for projects that didn't work, but there's a difference between criticism and what you're doing. And what exactly am I doing? Jimmy challenged, though his voice betrayed his nervousness at Mark's movement. You're being a coward, Mark said simply. You're hiding behind the pretense of honest criticism to be cruel. And you're doing it on live television where I can't really defend myself without looking like the bad guy. Jimmy's producer was now frantically trying to get his attention, but Jimmy seemed determined to see this through to whatever bitter end awaited. I'm not being cruel, Mark. I'm being honest. Something this industry could use more of. Honest? Mark's voice carried a note of disbelief. Jimmy, you want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about why you really brought me on here tonight. What are you talking about? Jimmy's confidence wavered. This whole thing, this ambush, it's not about the movie at all, is it? Mark took a step closer to Jimmy's desk. This is about something else entirely. Jimmy's eyes darted nervously toward his producer, then back to Mark. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Jimmy. I'm stating facts. 3 months ago, my production company passed on a project that your management team pitched to us. A project that, frankly, wasn't very good. And suddenly, tonight, you're attacking my work on live television. The color drained from Jimmy's face completely. That has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? Mark's voice was steady, controlled. Jimmy, your team pitched us a comedy special. Something about celebrity impressions and musical bits. We passed because it wasn't right for our company. And now, 3 months later, you're sitting here trying to humiliate me on national television. You're being paranoid, Jimmy said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Jimmy, you've been hostile from the moment I sat down. You've lied about seeing my movie. You've been condescending and disrespectful. And now I find out you and your writers have been mocking my work behind the scenes. That's not professional behavior. That's personal. Jimmy's hands were visibly shaking now. Mark, I think you're reading too much into this. Reading too much into it? Mark's voice rose slightly. Jimmy, you just spent 10 minutes trying to tear down a project you haven't seen, based on lies you told on live television? And you think I'm reading too much into it? The studio audience was completely captivated now, watching this confrontation unfold with the kind of fascination usually reserved for car crashes. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real, raw, and completely unpredictable. Look, Mark, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Jimmy tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Wrong foot? Mark's laugh was cold. Jimmy, you didn't just start on the wrong foot. You planned this. You brought me on here knowing exactly what you were going to do. You wanted to embarrass me because your feelings got hurt over a business decision. That's not true, Jimmy protested, but his voice was weak. Then prove it, Mark challenged. Jimmy, if this is really about honest criticism and not personal revenge, then let's talk about the real issues. Let's talk about why you think it's okay to lie to guests, to mock their work behind their backs, and to use your platform to settle personal scores. Jimmy looked desperately around the studio, seeking some kind of escape, but there was nowhere to go. The cameras were rolling, the audience was watching, and Mark Wahlberg was not backing down. I don't have to prove anything to you, Jimmy said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You're right, Mark agreed. You don't have to prove anything to me, but you should probably think about what you're proving to them. He gestured toward the audience, who were watching with a mixture of fascination and horror. Jimmy's eyes followed Mark's gesture, and for the first time since the interview began, he seemed to realize the full scope of what was happening. His reputation, his carefully crafted image, everything he'd built over years of hosting, was crumbling in real time. Mark, I think maybe we should just end this here, Jimmy said weakly. End it? Mark's voice carried a note of incredulity. Jimmy, you started this. You brought me on here under false pretenses. You've been lying and disrespectful, and now you want to just end it because it's not going the way you planned? Jimmy's silence spoke volumes. He had no answer, no defense, no way to explain away what had just happened. The mask had slipped completely, and everyone could see exactly who Jimmy Fallon really was when the cameras were rolling, but the script was gone. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but Mark wasn't finished. He had one more card to play, and Jimmy's stunned expression told him this was the moment to use it. You know what the really sad part is, Jimmy? Mark's voice was calm now, almost conversational. I actually used to respect you. I thought you were one of the good ones in this business. Someone who genuinely cared about making people laugh, about celebrating creativity. Jimmy's mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. But this? Mark gestured around the studio. This isn't about entertainment or honesty or journalism. This is about a grown man who couldn't handle being told no, so he decided to use his platform to get revenge. And the worst part? You're doing it in front of all these people who came here to have a good time. Mark turned to address the audience directly, something that clearly wasn't planned, and made Jimmy's producer frantically signal the camera operators. You folks came here tonight expecting to see a fun interview, maybe some laughs, maybe learn something about a new movie. Instead, you got to watch your host lie to a guest, mock their work, and then try to justify it when he got called out. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't the scripted banter they'd expected. This was raw, unfiltered truth. Mark, please. Jimmy finally found his voice, but it was weak, desperate. Can we just move on from this? Move on? Mark turned back to Jimmy, his expression incredulous. Jimmy, you brought me here tonight to humiliate me on live television because your feelings got hurt over a business decision. You lied about seeing my movie, you've been condescending and disrespectful, and you just admitted that you and your writers have been mocking my work behind the scenes. And now you want to move on? I never said we were mocking your work, Jimmy protested weakly. You said your writers were laughing at the prison scene. Mark shot back immediately. A scene that was based on real people's experiences with redemption and second chances. You and your team were sitting around laughing at stories that meant something to people who've been through hell and found their way back. Jimmy's face went pale. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, Jimmy? Mark's voice carried a dangerous edge now. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you meant exactly what you said. You thought it was funny. You thought real people's pain was something to laugh about. That's not fair, Jimmy said, but his voice lacked any conviction. Fair? Mark's laugh was bitter. Jimmy, you want to talk about fair? Is it fair to lie to guests about seeing their work? Is it fair to use your platform to settle personal scores? Is it fair to mock people's authentic experiences because you think it makes good material for your writer's room? Jimmy looked desperately toward his producer, who was now standing in the wings making increasingly frantic gestures. But the damage was done, and everyone in the studio knew it. I think we need to go to commercial, Jimmy said weakly. No, Mark said firmly. We're not going to commercial. We're going to finish this conversation right here, right now. Because these people deserve to know what kind of person they're supporting when they tune in to watch your show. Jimmy's hands were visibly trembling now. Mark, I'm asking you to stop. You're asking me to stop? Mark's voice rose slightly. Jimmy, you started this. You brought me on here under false pretenses. You've been lying and disrespectful from the moment I sat down. And now you want me to stop because it's not going the way you planned? I made a mistake, Jimmy said desperately. I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. A mistake? Mark's expression was incredulous. Jimmy, this wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. You planned this whole thing. You brought me on here knowing exactly what you were going to do. You wanted to embarrass me, to tear down my work, to get some kind of revenge for a business decision that had nothing to do with you personally. Jimmy's silence was deafening. He had no defense, no explanation, no way to justify what he'd done. You know what the really pathetic part is? Mark continued, his voice deadly calm. I would have respected you if you'd just been honest. If you'd said, hey, I'm disappointed that your company passed on our project, but I understand it's business. Instead, you chose to be petty and vindictive. It wasn't about the project, Jimmy said weakly, but even he didn't sound convinced. It wasn't? Mark's eyebrows raised. Jimmy, 3 months ago your team pitched us a comedy special. We passed because it wasn't right for our company. Tonight, you attack my work on live television. You think that's a coincidence? Jimmy's producer was now frantically trying to get the attention of the camera operators, but they seemed as mesmerized by the confrontation as everyone else in the studio. I want you to know something, Jimmy, Mark said, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the studio lean forward. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've dealt with difficult people, hostile interviews, unfair criticism, but I've never encountered someone who was so willing to compromise their own integrity just to settle a personal score. Mark, please. Jimmy's voice was barely above a whisper. Please what? Mark stood up from his chair, his decision clearly made. Please pretend this didn't happen? Please act like your behavior tonight was acceptable? Please help you save face after you've shown everyone exactly who you really are? Jimmy's eyes darted around the studio, looking for some kind of escape, but there was nowhere to go. The cameras were rolling, the audience was watching, and Mark Wahlberg was about to deliver the final blow. "I came here tonight to talk about a project I believe in," Mark said, his voice carrying across the silent studio. "A story about redemption, about second chances, about people who've made mistakes and found their way back. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who couldn't handle being told no." Mark reached up and unclipped his microphone, the small gesture carrying enormous weight in the silence of the studio. "Jimmy, I hope you figure out what kind of person you want to be," Mark said, placing the microphone on Jimmy's desk. "Because the person you showed everyone tonight, that's not someone worth watching." The studio was completely silent as Mark walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned quiet. Jimmy sat frozen at his desk, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. "Mark, wait!" Jimmy called out desperately, but Mark didn't turn around. "I'm done here," Mark said without looking back. "And honestly, Jimmy, so are you." The cameras caught every moment as Mark Wahlberg walked off the Tonight Show set, leaving Jimmy Fallon sitting alone at his desk, his reputation in ruins and his true character exposed for all to see. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they just witnessed, while Jimmy's producer frantically tried to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. But there was no saving it. In less than 20 minutes, Jimmy Fallon had revealed himself to be petty, vindictive, and willing to compromise his professional integrity for personal revenge. And Mark Wahlberg had called him out on it in front of millions of viewers. The confrontation was over, but the fallout was just beginning. Jimmy's carefully crafted image as the fun, loving, supportive host was shattered, replaced by the reality of someone who couldn't handle rejection and was willing to use his platform to settle personal scores. Mark Wahlberg had walked onto that set expecting a professional interview about his work. Instead, he'd exposed the true character of one of late-night television's biggest stars, and in doing so, had shown everyone watching what real integrity looks like. So what do you think? Was Mark right to call out Jimmy's behavior so publicly, or should he have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal what really goes on behind the scenes in Hollywood.